Good morning and good afternoon and possibly good evening from wherever you are in the world. Welcome today to Shifting from Grudge to Grit, Grace, and Gratitude. I am so excited to have Leslie Flowers with us today. But before I get into her bio, I want to thank the guests that are here today, those that are joining the replay, and then sincere apologies. We're going to be missing my beautiful co-host, Jamila, who is unable to be here today, and really sad that she's not here because she was looking forward to meeting Leslie. Um, so, with no further ado, I just want to make sure we press live for our Instagram um, followers. I'm going to introduce a little bit about our esteemed guest. She says, "This is my story from a life of happiness to devastation after 33 years building a family, crying for weeks in the dark, putting myself up by my bootstraps and 2 steps forward and 1 back, developing grace. And in the end, the full circle back to gratitude for all that occurred." Throughout her career, Leslie Flowers has demonstrated remarkable versatility, adaptability, and resilience in inspiring and motivating aspiring and emerging leaders to excel in their lives and professions. Her lifelong passion for learning kickstarted an intellectual and emotional journey that has taken her through corporate publishing, entrepreneurship, board service, women's empowerment, and immersion into professional development, focusing on human performance and achievement. And before I forget, there's an exciting masterclass that's starting. Just remind me again, very soon, next
Oh,
week,
wait,
Monday.
yeah, March 4th, a week from
Masterclass.
Monday. Yes, it's the a 12-week course, my hybrid, which is the core awareness foundational training, and it's Mondays on Zoom, 1 to 2 Eastern. And what is it in your part of the world, my friend?
In my part of the world, in South Africa, it's a 7 hour difference, so it will be from 8 onwards.
Awesome.
I will make sure we add that link into this post.
Perfect.
And by all means, happy to do a complete new post because this is one of the prime examples of somebody who knows how to get to the other side of grit using self-awareness. So this 12 weeks, if you do embark on joining Leslie, you're going to be in for a treat. So let's kick off. Where would you like to start with the story?
Well, I have to say that I love grit, grace, and gratitude. And I would have to say that it's grit, grace, grit, and gratitude, right? So all the way through grace, the
Yes.
grit must persist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you
Mm-hmm.
simply give up, right? So I can start
Absolutely.
back at the beginning if you like.
So let's start there. How do you define then grit in your own life? And can you share an example of a situation where your grit was put to the test?
Oh, well, of course, the story is a big way that grit was put to the test. However, there are lots of examples in all of our lives, right? When things don't go the way we expect them to, but so
Mm-hmm.
we can learn to understand that that's okay, right? Things are not supposed to always go the way you want. But the grit is the ability to stop yourself for just a second, to stop myself. And instead of being upset or angry, the resilience is to reframe the thought. Now, just as
Mm-hmm.
an example, this is the perfect example. It happens every day. It happened to us 10 minutes ago.
Yes, you want to
Right.
share that?
I will, because we don't realize a lot of times, Anissa. And by the way, thank you for inviting me to your
Oh,
platform. I'm
it's a
so
pleasure having you
grateful.
here.
Hello, Carolina. So glad you're here and happy Friday. Ashif, Hi. Ashraf is in Toronto, Canada.
I know, I
Oh,
know.
you
And
do know?
Carolina, where's Carolina from?
I don't know.
Please tell us where you're dialing in from. I'd love to know. And Ashif is our continuous advocate, ambassador, and is always supporting us. So we're always grateful for having him here and
Oh,
his wisdom.
yeah.
Great wisdom.
Yes. So I didn't test yesterday. However, I've done scads of lives over the last, say, 5 years, lots of them, and a lot of problem solving, a lot of things, down to unplugging and plugging in. Do you remember that one? Oh, in the Netherlands, how wonderful.
Welcome, the Netherlands.
Yes, yes. Thank you for being here. So I got on 15 minutes early. And hi, Sean. Thank you for being here. Yes, that's right. And I'm on video every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, where I teach Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And today we're talking about Wallace Simpson,
Mm,
the American woman who married the King of England, and he gave up his throne for her. And
oh
I
my
love
gosh.
that kind of love, don't you?
I've got to join that live. Oh my word. I do want to listen in.
So anyway, what happened was is we I used a link to come in, and I thought I'll come in 15 minutes early, and there was a block. I had to do A or B. I've never seen this before, not quite like this. It said you have to have this account, this platform, or another platform, or you can't come in on this link. So one of them was Facebook and the other was YouTube. Well, I do have a YouTube account, but I'm not on Facebook. Those people kicked me off when my laptop was hacked a couple of years ago. Anyway, I got back all my time. Not being on Facebook is the biggest gift I've ever given myself, ever.
Yes.
Anyway, so here's where the grit and the grace is. There are other links inside these studios, but this one was forcing the guest to log into either Facebook or YouTube. Now I know that these they have different links, but there was no time, and we were going live. The show must go on. So then I got the idea, and this is where experience and thinking clearly comes in, because I could have been very upset. You could have been upset. However, I went to my LastPass and found my YouTube account and came in that way. So
Mm,
that's grit. It's persistence. It's clarity. It's focus. Right? We were going live come
mm.
hell or high water.
Yes, yes. And so it's that how do you grow through instead of going through whatever you're faced with and being radically resilient through it all? And I think it's an underrated, there's such a fine line between knowing what resilience is, and we can all be resilient, but radically resilient is saying, I'm okay, bring it on.
Yes, and we
Whatever you
all
need to bring on.
you're right. We all have resilience, but to what degree? It's a
Yes.
muscle
Yes.
that grows like anything, any other muscle, in direct proportion to its use. And so obviously you and I have done scads of these lives,
Mhm.
and it took under 5 minutes to resolve what could have been a mess, right?
Mhm.
But we didn't give up. We just didn't give up. We just kept moving our feet, small steps, one at a time. So that's a small example, and I think we do it all the time. But
We
the core,
do.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry, Leslie. I wanted to just also ask you to tap into the difference between our perceptions versus our perspective on circumstances or events or situations in our lives.
Boy, that's a good question. Perspective and perception. Well,
Hmm.
I would say, and no one's ever asked me that question before. Can you imagine? I would say that it is perception that causes, what was the other word? Perspective.
Perspective.
It is perception that causes perspective. So each one of us
Hmm.
have a uniquely different perspective of what the screen looks like that we're all looking at. No
Mm-hmm.
two environments are identical. And so the way we see it, our perspective is built on our perception, which I've discovered never stays the same. It's always growing. By the
Mm-hmm.
end of this live, your perception about something will grow and change. And so then I'll ask you a question.
Please go ahead. This is a
So if
dialogue.
so if perception, our view of things changes all the time when we get new information, we evolve and oh, I like that idea. I don't like that one. I'm adding this one, etc. And everybody's perception is different based on our experiences. No two are
Mm-hmm.
identical.
Yes.
Then why do we fight to be right about anything at any given moment? Because we're all right in this given moment. We
Mm-hmm.
are correct, all of us. Yet in a second, it would have changed. So then why do we waste time arguing about whose way is right and whose way is wrong rather than me asking? Well, I was going to ask you, but rather than asking, why are you so sure
Mm-hmm.
this is accurate? And that's where you get more information, right? And your perception grows again. So why do people stand their ground and insist that what they know in their life up to this very moment, everybody ought to adopt it? My way is the best way. Do it my way. Why do people do this when their perception of the world changes constantly? How about that for a
Mm-hmm.
question?
That was a loaded question right back. You answered a question with a question. That's sneaky, but I'm gonna continue to continue the show. But let's just you did answer it to some extent. So my view is a little bit different. And so it's kind of leading into what you were saying. Why do we have these different perceptions? And for me, perception is my reality based on my conditioned beliefs, the
Yes.
stories, the narrative that I've almost attached myself to. And you rightfully stated that they evolve as we have new experiences.
Mhm.
And these new experiences is almost like if you think about a series on Netflix, we've now added season two. And so the perception changes. I feel
Right.
perspective is the better approach to go with because
Mhm.
perception is our reality based on our lens, but
Yep.
perspective invites us to consider others' point of view and to do so from a place of no judgment,
That's right.
no ego, and honoring the grace in that exchange. So that
Yeah.
becomes a shared exchange that has got no attachment. In fact, it's very much non attachment to what the other person is sharing. So the invitation is how do I stay neutral? That's my view to that question. Have I answered it?
Oh, yes. And I agree 100% with your view. And that's the beauty of this kind of a dialogue
Hmm.
because we're actually saying the same thing. I
We
totally agree
are.
with you. I could say it that way. I like the way you say it. And here's the thing, those who are listening may not be ready for the way I said it, but more so the
Oh,
way you said it today.
exactly.
But
Hmm.
another day, depending on their perception, their beliefs, and their level of awareness on that other day, they may resonate with me instead
Hmm.
of you.
Exactly.
So the way you said it was perfect. It is your beliefs. The only thing, you know, beliefs which are primarily negative and they're set,
Hmm.
right? This is what we believe. What you're actually asking us to do is to stand in between conscious awareness and reactive subconscious, kind of come
Absolutely.
to the middle, right? The objective spot where you can now choose which
Yes.
thought. And sometimes if you're upset and angry, you will choose to be reactive, right? It's okay, not all the time, but at least you have the choice. And that's what I hear in the way you explained it. It is coming to a place of objectivity and responsiveness instead of reaction or reactivity and subjectivity. So you really,
Yes.
it's kind of like what a coach does. A really good coach, they're closer to you, the client, than you are to your husband, your children, your pastor. It doesn't matter. And here's why. Because a good coach can do this. They will step into your world. They are your biggest ally. They are looking only for your success and your greatness. Their own perspective doesn't really matter. What matters is their resilience, their ability to do this. So you can tell your coach things that you wouldn't tell your husband or your wife. You might not even tell your hairdresser, but your coach is sworn for your greatness and confidentiality.
I love that. I love it. So let's acknowledge Ashif. He's saying openness is this the window? I think he would mean to the soul. Eternal soul must continue to grow and give. And then Carolina says, I think ongoing experiences form our perceptions. Absolutely. This is
100%.
why we, in certain situations, think we know better. See, Carolina's lens was very much in alignment with what you were saying, Leslie. Thank
Yes.
you for those comments.
Yeah, they're great. Thank you.
So let's get back to sharing an example of your own life where you had to adopt grit, where you might have been in this dark night of the soul experience, but you had to shift. And I think we read it at the start of the opening, that 33 years, and you had to be pulled through, as you said, pulling yourself up by my bootstraps. I want to know more about that.
Okay. I'll tell you the story. And, if as you listen, you are going to hear things that happened in your own life. Those
Mhm.
ideas will come from your memory because you will recognize that we all go through this,
Yes.
right? And the power is in how you explain it, in the vulnerability, so that people can actually say, wow, hers was worse
Mhm.
than mine. I know if she could do it, I could do it too. Right? That's really what we want people to see themselves in us and realize, hey, we deal with this all the time. You're not the only one. Do you agree?
Leslie, I'm so pleased you mentioned that because the entire reason why I started this segment was to provoke this type of feeling, thinking, and emotions, and to set the stage for people to feel vulnerable and okay with it because we are shamed and we are asked to show up in these archetypal roles and masks. But our stories are not, it's not about us. They are not for us. They're in pursuit of a purpose, a greater purpose for others. So I resonate entirely because we have a sacred circle group that we attend, myself and a few ladies, and holding space in that sacredness. The magic essence is in the vulnerability and being willing to witness the person sharing their story and validate and hear them, truly hear, understand and acknowledge them, but also to know that you are in that story and that you can overcome. Hello,
Absolutely.
Ronald.
Glad you're here. Okay, so
So let's get back to your story.
let me just tell you a little bit about me.
Mhm.
I okay, I am a double Sagittarius and Virgo rising. For those of you who know, you know that I'm a philosopher, a traveler. I get great ideas. I don't always want to finish them. I'm the idea person. I get lots of creative ideas. So honestly, my life, while it had its downs. I had an abusive father who was abused. So I
Mhm.
understand better now that that was the only tool he had, was what he knew. And my mother lived in his shadow. However, he was a good provider, right? So people, I guess they do the best they can with what they have.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Let me get a sip of water.
Please do.
Thank you.
What I'm hearing you say while you're taking that sip is that you're now able to give your dad grace because there's understanding.
Yes, yes. And it took a long time. So none of these things
Mhm.
that we discuss are overnight. So if you're
Mhm.
looking for a quick answer by going and grabbing tips and tools, at
No.
some point you have got to, it's kind of like playing chess. Once you start beating the person who taught you, it's time for a new teacher. Right. So
Mm.
you learn more about the game. It makes no sense to continue playing the same person when you're beating them all the time. Anyway, so life was good for me. Right. My parents were together for most of my childhood. Actually, I think they were the whole childhood. And I went to San Francisco State in the 60s, sang in a rock band, majored in drama, took
Tell
classes
me.
took classes from Rene Aubergenois, who played Odo the shapeshifter on Star Trek Deep State Space Nine, and also
Really?
on Benson, he was, I believe, the butler. Anyway, it was great.
Yes.
San Francisco in the 60s. I saw all the bands for free, went to the best school, right, for drama in the country. And really, it was a charmed life. I mean, it really was. When I finished college, well, I didn't complete, but after my third year, I decided that I wanted to go to the Far East. Now, I had been a stewardess for Northwest Airlines, which is domestic, but I wanted to fly international. And trips over to the Far East are still very expensive. And back in the 60s, they were astronomical. You could go to Europe, three times for what it would cost you to travel or across the Pacific. So I decided that I was going to be a stewardess taking troops into Vietnam from San Francisco, from Travis Air Force Base. And how exciting. I lived right down the street from Janis Joplin. I lived under Twin Peaks in San Francisco and drove a 1960 TR3. Life
Yeah.
was great. Beautiful
Great.
city, and I learned to dance flamenco and play flamenco. I mean, it did just, the creative nature always seemed to drive me through any problems. In fact, one time I was going on a 2-week flight, and that's how long we're gone. And I had misread my bank statement. Back then, we wrote them out. And I was getting ready to leave for 2 weeks, and I thought I had $1,000, and it was only 100.
Yikes.
So what did I do? I called my dad. My dad sent me the money and I was good. So always, blessed. Somehow the universe moved me toward what I loved. So in after the flights, etc., I went to work for a stock brokerage company in San Francisco, and that's where I met my husband of 33 years.
Mm.
He was working in teletype, doing transactions with stock, and I was a secretary. And he was from North Carolina. We're out in the West Coast. So we decided to get married and move to the East Coast and raise a family. And that's exactly what we did. And really, Anissa, for the most part, it was phenomenal. It was a wonderful marriage. We had everything. We had 2 cats in the yard. Life used to be so hard, but everything was easy because of him.
Uh,
So we lived a wonderful life together. We had 2 children. We had 2 cats and 2 dogs also. And we got to the point where our kids were out on their own. So that's what, 17, 18, maybe up to 20 years. And he received a golden parachute, had worked years and years in a startup company. So he came home to start a business rather than working at the office. And I was working for startup companies in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. Now, startups they have a nature of their own. You work 60 to 70 hours a week. You choose
Yes.
to. You're gaining some sweat equity. You are being paid, not as much, right? But you are being paid with the hope or the intention that there will be stock coming your way, right? When
Yes.
the company is sold. So out of three of them, the third one paid. But the first two, I put in all that time. But while I was doing that, my husband was just learning about the PC and got very addicted to certain sites. And
Oh.
yeah, so one day it was Christmas time. This is where the whole 33 years literally dissolved and imploded. And I was blindsided. So I was home at Christmas. Now I'm working 60 or 70 hours a week in a startup. So I am not in my office at home. Right?
Yes.
I have no interest in a computer. I've seen it. But it was Christmas time. And I had a friend up in New Jersey and couldn't remember the name of the town. So I went into the office. Now, this is around 2002. And I sat down at the computer. It was not a laptop. Thank you, Ronald. So it wasn't a laptop. It was one of those ones that sat on the floor, the
Mm-hmm.
tower that sat on the floor, which weighed a ton.
I
Right?
know.
Say that you have a 1 pound or 2 pound laptop.
Hard drive.
These things, took muscles to lift and move. So, so I sat down at the computer and brought up a map of New Jersey. But back then, remember how long it took to regenerate a graphic on the screen? You could give
Yes.
birth. You could have labor pains. You could cook dinner waiting for it to generate. And so it was regenerating because I figured if I saw the name of the city, I could find her and call her and wish her Merry Christmas. That's what this was all
Mm-hmm.
about. It was nothing very innocent, really. Well, I started looking around while I'm waiting, and I see an email that's open. Yes, we have, Ronald. We have come a long way for sure. Ah, Jersey girl.
Hey, Emily. Nice to see you.
Yeah. So I read the email. It was 2 or 3 lines, and here's what it said. I had such a great time last night. Let's do it again next week. Well,
And
and
then?
that yeah, and well, what happens is the blood begins to rise in your ears. Um, I,
Yes.
I was stunned. I could not think. I was a physical mass of the shakes. I was blindsided. And like I said, I couldn't think. I could only shake. And I called him in and I said, "What is this?" And I showed him on the screen. Now, understand, guys aren't always so smart because he knew that I didn't want to be near the computer. But in this case, it was Christmas and he left it open.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, "Well, come in here and let's sit down. I want to tell you." Right. And I'm shaking. And he said, "Well, this happened one time with one woman, and I am so sorry. Please forgive me." Well, I was enraged. And I went back into the office and literally was able to lift up the tower computer and slam it into the concrete floor. This is like
Wow.
the mother lifting the car off the child, right?
Yes.
This is like, where did the strength come for me to actually lift that thing up over my head and then slam it? Right. So I was literally taking out on the computer instead of him. Right. Well,
Mm.
as things unraveled, that was not the only time. And I, being the investigator, the detective, the philosopher, I became a dog without a bone, or after a bone. And I
Yeah.
started, and I knew PCs. He didn't. So I was able to go into the history. I found everything. Now, the problem was, hi, David, thank you. The problem was, as most people will say, well, you two could work through this. You can get help. There are
Mm-hmm.
people out there. And we did. We went to a therapist. But the bottom line was, he loved it. He was in midlife. He was so far down the road with kicking up his heels, right? And I often think that our men, our adult men, are still emotional adolescents. So
Absolutely. I
they're
just want to
in
second that.
yeah. So what happens, I think, and well, what I think, from what research I've done, and some people I know that have done this work, it's the disappearance of the male role model that used to
Yeah.
be prevalent for men. So they learn how to treat women. Now, of course, not always the nicest way, but certainly you had elders of the church, you had uncles, you had cousins, families were closer. So a young man and a young woman were able to model how to treat women, how to have certain well, that's gone because right around the 70s, the divorce rate went 50% divorces for first marriages and 75% for second and third
Wow.
marriages.
That's
So now you've
massive.
got right. So what happens is these men, these young men who are still emotionally adolescents, are wearing a mask, if you will. And he'd spent his whole life being a great father, a really good provider, a good husband. For all intents and purposes, he did it all right, but I think he got tired. And by the
Mm-hmm.
time he hit midlife, his 16-year-old self showed up. So the bottom line was, he didn't want to work it out. He was loving this new way of being after 33 years. You might too, right? So
Yeah.
therefore, I didn't want it. I wanted to work on it. But if the other person doesn't want to, it's tough. And so there was no grit, there was no grace, and there
Mm.
was no gratitude. In fact, I took the low road. I got on the computer and I investigated and everything. Made my upset myself. So for 2 years I had him leave because he wasn't going to change. And oh yeah, you've heard it. Okay, I'll do my best to tell you what happened. So I was devastated. I had 2 grown children. They were wonderful children. We had this adorable uh, early American replica of 1600s home with latches and bolts in the woods. I mean, everything was really rather magical. I couldn't complain. And on the few days that things weren't great, I knew, because I had done landmark education in the mid 90s, to choose the way it is
Yeah.
and the way it isn't. I married him, so I'm going to choose what I don't like, because what we resist persists. So I found that
Mm-hmm.
by choosing those bad days, okay, so this is a bad day, rather than resisting it to make it be more of a bad day, I choose it. And now one of my watchwords is, or my things is that the thing I like the most about myself is, somebody asked the question, otherwise I never would have thought about it, is that I laugh at the expectation of things not going the way I expect.
Mm.
Right. So when it
I
happens
love.
and it doesn't work, I just laugh because that's the universe. And I also know that for every low, there's a matching high. So even when you're in the dumps, part of the grace is the ability to do what we talked about, is to come to center, to do our best to be objective about what's going on, to use our conscious mind and blot out the subconscious reactions and anger. Not easy to do. So for 2 years,
No.
I sat in the dark crying. I went to work every day. When I came home, and I sat in the home that we raised our children in the woods, a beautiful life. Now it felt like during those 2 years, Anissa, that there had been an earthquake. Every step I took was rocky. I had to look down to make sure I wouldn't fall. The roots,
Mm.
my roots were cut. So and I was only half a person because we grew up together. We spent 33 years
Yes.
together, like from 27 into our 50s or whatever it was. I don't remember now. Yes, you're right. Unrealistic expectations only bring frustration. Yes, and also that's a really good point, Sean. But I've also learned that frustration is the mother of invention, also.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So sometimes inside our frustration is that thing that we're going to change. I mean, think about Thomas Edison, who does 10,000 tries for the incandescent bulb, even if it was only 2,000. Who does that? I don't know why he was so compelled. Maybe his eyesight was going bad from reading by candlelight. Maybe his fingers were burned from putting out the candles. Who the hell knows why Thomas Edison was so compelled? And that's been my work, really, is this purpose and desire that outweighs everything else. So for 2 years, I came home and cried. And then one day I woke up.
Leslie,
Yes.
so before you go further, because there's
Okay.
something that I captured and I want us to go back there.
Thank you.
It's such an important part based on all the comments. Thank you so much for your positive engagement here and active participation. I think that you highlighted something around you couldn't think straight. You're almost falling over your feet. Was there an element of why is this happening to me? The victim consciousness. At this point in your life, before the 2 years, when you just discovered this, it was, why is this happening to me? Why the hell me? Then we move into the second level of consciousness is, hey, but hold on. How might I have co-created this? What was my role in this?
Very
The,
astute.
the third thing I'm getting a sense of as the 2.5 years was moving past, it is, okay, hold on. How does this happen through me? How do I take on by choice? How do I become autonomous and more empowered? Shifting away from being a victim, shifting away of knowing I've co-created and saying it's through me. And this model that I'm talking about is Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith. He speaks about the 4 stages of consciousness.
Yeah.
So please do share. I think there's some more comments from Sean.
Yeah, go
Marriage
ahead.
isn't about finding the right person. Marriage is two broken people who came together to make it work. Requires both to become the right person. Okay, thanks for tagging Michelle and Judith. Yes, I think they will be. I hope they can join us one day. Be the right person by choice. But just on those comments alone, we come together, Sean, because we're expecting one another to complete each other. But we need to be with complementing each other rather. So I want you to go back now to what you were going to delve in. How did you put yourself out? What are those strategies or mindset shifts that you needed to that helped you to maintain the resilience in the face of this crazy, insane experience?
You know, I can only tell you what happened, right? And I can reflect and look back on it. Um, a number of years before that, I had fallen and broken my arm and had surgery. And I don't know if you ever had a broken limb, but laying in bed, right, after a week of it, I was done.
Mm,
I could not stay in bed anymore. It took everything I had and more to get up and get dressed, but I couldn't stand it. I had reached my limit. So fast forward to after 2 years of crying. Oh, and please, I really took the low road. I mean, there's a lot of
mm,
things that I'm ashamed of, but I couldn't help it.
mm,
Now, I knew And this is where self-love comes in, and where I have never forgiven myself until this year. And what I had not forgiven myself, and our friend Michael helped me with this, Michael Poderano.
Mm.
It
Ah,
was
Michael.
knowing in the beginning that I had compromised. Oh gosh, where did you go? Okay, she's
I
coming back.
know. I lost
So,
you there for a moment.
so I knew before I married him that there was something that compromised my values, something big, and I ignored it. So
Mm.
while we had a wonderful, by and large, 33-year marriage, I had been harboring shame about compromising my own values. So what I had to do was forgive that. It wasn't
Mm.
forgiving him, it was forgiving the fact that I betrayed myself.
Yes.
So that's what I wanted to share about that. Now, here's what happened next. Just like with my arm, I woke up one day after 2 years of crying in the dark and I said, right, that's enough. It was like when I quit smoking. I've always been able to quit cold turkey. So it was like, Anissa, there was a switch. I had had it at that low vibration. I had had pity parties. I was bad mouthing him. Anybody who I lost friends because all I did was
Mm.
talk about what a blackguard he was. I'm
Mm.
telling you, I took the low road. It was the ugliest side of Leslie because I didn't want to give up what we had. And actually, the loss that I experienced had nothing to do with money.
Mm. Mm.
The real loss of long-term marriages is the stories.
Yes.
You don't have anybody other than your kids and your grandkids, which ultimately worked, but who are you going to talk about when the baby took their first step or when someone did their first ice skating? No one. So it is the stories, and we know how important stories are, right? Because the
Mm.
memories also bring back the vibrational, the frequency, the cellular frequency. So those stories are vital to keep us happy because
Yes.
memory captures the vibration. That's how visualization works, actually. You continue to bring up the visual image of what it is you want. You're already having it. It excites you, right? It puts chills on your arm because it's cellular. And that's the high vibration of love, gratitude, generosity, where you want to be as much as you can, right? But I was in the
Yes.
depths. So I woke up. I said, that's it. And I registered myself that day in my second weekend of the Landmark Forum. Oh my goodness, if you've ever done the Landmark Forum, it is so confrontational. It gets down to your basic originating incidents that had you believe what you believe. It's a transformational technology that came out of EST, right? Which was Werner Erhardt's baby in the 60s in San Francisco is where he started that. And out of that came LifeSpring and Landmark. Anyway, that was the only thing I know to do because that transformational technology grabs you, right? It's all about you and what the dark night of the soul, if you will. So I
Yes.
registered for that and I did that. And then I did their next program, which was the introduction leadership program. And then I did the self-expression and leadership. So for that year, all I did was stuff on myself. Now, was I sad? Yes. And I did go 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And I did follow him around. And I did hire a private investigator. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm so creative.
Mhm.
I found an old lady who was a private investigator to have her go and track his latest girlfriend. Anyway, so that's where I started. So that's where the grit began. It
Mhm.
was a switch. I had had enough. And I know now that this was the universe and my conscious awareness and my intuition and access to the universe that said, right, Leslie, you've cried enough. Now let's get back to living. Now, at that time, I thought about killing myself. Absolutely. I didn't really do anything about it, but I
Yeah.
imagined how upset he would be and how bad he would feel, all that teenage stuff when someone breaks up with it. And that's a fear of loss, one of the 6 basic fears, which is the loss of your love,
Yeah.
whether they died or you break up. So that's when it all began to turn around. And this is where grit stepped in. So I was still working full time, and I went to all of these trainings. And I love the technology. It's just wonderful. It makes you so aware and different perspectives and people that are on the same journey. It was perfect for me. It's a great starter for awareness, but there's some inherent things about it that people who are highly aware would not like. But as a beginning, as a technology beginning of awareness, it really is good. But they don't address the universal laws, gratitude, generosity, any of that stuff. They're money making. And it's a great program, right? But it's really money first, people second. Ultimately, a lot of people say that they're people first and money second. But when it comes to money, money is first. So, anyway,
Yeah.
so I did that and things started to turn around. And this is where grit came, but there was no grace. Not yet. He was still did a crappy thing. Yes. Emily,
I love that.
I wish someone had taken a picture of it, because actually it did work not very well afterwards, because there was a dent in the side. We had a concrete floor, which was covered in carpet, but it was a thin outdoor carpet. So there might as well have not been any carpet. And I took my aggression out on that. I don't know where I got the strength, honestly. So over
So,
the next,
Leslie,
oh yes, please interrupt.
Leslie.
Yes.
So just to bring us home to that point around,
Yes.
I see Ashley was saying, imagine gone wild. And Ronald says, my mother said, you never miss your water till the well runs dry. Oh, she died and took the water. Oh, Ronald.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to an earlier point that you made, because I think it's very important for those that are listening in to be mindful of this, is that just as our wounds and traumas and challenges are pathologized, it's in our cells, as you've mentioned it. So too, as you've said, are the good memories. And when we're in the victim consciousness, the brain is designed to almost believe that it's whatever that experience was, it will be on repeat. It's like it's repeating itself. And so you almost perpetuated that
Yeah.
through the things that you said you were doing, by hiring an investigator,
Yes.
by
Yes.
wanting to cause him pain and suffering. It was the egoic state that you were in. I'll
Yes.
show you. You're
Yes.
not going to win in this,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So it's very difficult to show up with grit in that, and definitely, absolutely no grace will be
No
there.
grace. No grace. No grace.
The
Now,
only time that the grace can be almost introduced is when we can be appreciative of, I call it the KPI of our lives. And this is also positive intelligence uses it. They talk about having the knowledge, the personal power, and the insight, which gives us the inspiration. I added the inspiration part. That's the KPI for our lives. Unless we understand that we have the knowledge and that personal power and that insight, it will never propel us forward, because we're still in victim. Those cells, the trauma is so deeply pathologized that we connect it to even other experiences that is unrelated to this, because there's a betrayal. So
yes.
there's grief.
Yes.
And you spoke about your dad earlier on. There was parts of the betrayal and grief, not the same. Maybe the context might have been different, but it was now years another disappointment in my life. And I might be wrong, but I'm almost sensing that parts of dad and whatever the experiences were there that were unfavorable versus what happened with your husband, it almost for lack of a better word, made it even 10 times worse.
Yeah, it could absolutely. And another interesting point, and I'm watching the time here, and because I do want to get to the end part, but one of the things that I realized a few years ago, I can't think of the woman's name. I see her face, but she's in personal development, and she does an event called Transform, and we were doing a paired sharing. This is a weekend of transformation and etc. with other people. It's a lot of fun. And
Yes.
so we were to do paired sharing with someone at our table, and it was about money. They would be money. And so you would talk to them. And I realized that what I was saying was, you betrayed me. Where are you? I've done all the work. Where is the money? And I realized that my relationship with money was about betrayal, as it was with my husband, as it was with my father. So, to your point, these are they in your belief system, you're expecting it, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
expecting that to happen, which is not a good thing. But I
Yeah.
was relating to money in the same way, which helped me become more objective once I had this realization. So, should I continue on to finish the story?
Please do. We have 9 minutes left.
Oh
It's
my
too
God.
quickly.
Oh,
Hi,
okay.
Dr. Maria. Dr. Maria is also here on Instagram with us from the UK. Thank you
Oh,
for
wonderful.
joining us each week as well. Please
Thank
do.
you. Yes. Okay. So then let's look at the next 15 years. You know, the woman he cheated on me with, he ended up marrying. So I didn't have her to anything. And he and I had an estranged relationship. Here we would have been best friends, but I was still hurt. So I never had him over with our kids. So over the next 15 years, our children each had two children who never saw us together,
Mm.
did not know their grandparents as a unit. And this is where I began to realize that it wasn't some, by the way, I walked away with $4,000 after 33 years, but that's another whole story, right? Because he went through all of the retirement and everything, gone. It was a midlife for him in a way. So for 15 years, the only stories I could tell were to my children, and the grandchildren loved hearing the stories about their parents, the things that their parents did when they were little that got them into trouble. Tell us the story about the hat. Tell us the story about the trees. Tell us the story about the fruit flies in Daddy's wastebasket when he was in high school. Right? They just love hearing those stories. But then there came a time. So the two steps forward, or three steps forward and one or two steps back, is where the grace began. I kept thinking that I had forgiven him, but then I hadn't. And then it would happen again and again and again. And to your point, very insightful, came a day where instead of looking at him for those bad things he did, I began to remind myself about what a good father he was,
Mm.
and to become grateful that my children had both parents, because my kids said to me, you and dad were the only two parents. All of our friends were products of divorce, right? So we were together during their whole high school, and they told us, right, and told me that this was unique, which I was unaware of. So the grace began to develop as I began to express gratitude, not necessarily to him, but within myself. Or even I would say to the children, your dad was very good at this, right? Which was a big turning point for me. And that's where the grace comes in at the inception of gratitude.
Mm.
Gratitude to go back to what was initially that you loved about this person and the wonderful things that he did. Now, to wrap this up, after 15 years, Christmas Eve was always at my house, right? I'm the matriarch. And after 15 years of him not being there at Christmas, I invited him and his wife to a
Wow.
family Christmas Eve. And of course, they were late. And the kid says, well, when do we eat? When are we going to open presents? I said, I have a surprise for you. Well, it shocked them all when he came in with her. Now, what we didn't know at the time is that she was dying. And the
Oh,
following spring, she died. And I was in the hospital, right? So the gesture, the gratitude and the
mm,
grace had me bring them in, right, to my home. And that is really what rounded off the whole story. So I was grateful in the beginning that I met this man, even though I betrayed myself, which I now know is what I needed to forgive. By and large, none of us are perfect. So by and large, it was, I would say, collectively really good. I mean, I would give it a 90% over 33 years. That's pretty darn good.
mm,
Now, the grace, my children buried their father 3 weeks ago.
mm,
He had become very ill. We had become friends again. There were no regrets. He put me as executor of his estate until he married the second woman. Right? And then he changed it to my son because that would have been insane for me to be executor and her to be involved. So he actually relieved me of the pressure of managing his estate. I mean, there's a lot when someone dies.
mm,
Also, last year, we did a quick claim deed in his parents' home that we both owned. He turned over to me. And
mm,
today is the closing of that home, which was it's a small home, but it's my nest egg. And so he left us prepared and taken care of, and the way I always knew him to be. We had no regrets. We began buying Christmas presents together, even during those 15 years for the children. They came from both of us. So we worked our way back to being friends, right? And it was because of the grace that came when I was able to express gratitude. So I am so complete with this whole thing because there were no regrets. He left us well taken care of. My children and his current wife took care of all the funeral stuff. I wasn't the executor, so I was there at the funeral primarily for my children because losing their father was difficult. And that
mm,
completes the story with no regrets, full grace in store, and I've become more graceful. Now that I know what grace is, I can do it again and again. And it hinges on being grateful for what is and for what isn't. The end.
Leslie. Wow. I'm, I want to listen and I want to listen more, but I know we've only got 2 minutes to wrap up. But a lot of what you shared resonates with me because I also consciously uncoupled from my partner, and you would have read that article as well. And today I am friends with him, but you rightfully say it is about when we let go of judgment, when we forgive ourselves, when we can love ourselves, and when we can return back to self respect and our own essence, when we reconnect and reclaim that essence within ourselves, we are able to better see it in others and
Yes.
then appreciate them for it, and then not have grudges and have this radical empathy and forgiveness and be curious in it and know that what were the actions about. So I want to ask you to wrap up with the following, and you may have answered it already. This is the integration question, and I always like to have some sort of integration for the audience, for those that might see themselves in this story, right? As I have seen myself. How
Oh,
do you
good.
see the interplay between grit, grace, and gratitude in achieving personal growth and success? In 30 seconds or minutes at most. No pressure.
I think that they are, I've never seen these three words together, and I do love that you coupled these concepts. I think we all have grit to an extent, and that it can be developed. I believe that grace is the result of beginning to get curious and to really look at what happened, and is there another perspective,
Mhm.
right, to consider. And that's actually what happened as I began to look at the things he was grateful for. But it took a long time. It was 3 steps forward, 2 steps. Oh, I'm over it now. I'm over it. No, you're not. You're mad at him again. Okay, I'm over it. I'm over it. Right. I was ready to be over it. But the grace came to me really the day that I invited his wife, the woman he cheated on me with, into my home, into my family. And she wanted nothing more than to be part of our family, right? Because this was a good
Yeah.
family in so many ways. So I think that they're contingent upon one another. I think we have grit, but I will tell you, it was the universe that woke me up after 2 years of crying in the dark and said, okay, Leslie, you've had enough.
Enough.
Enough is enough. And that's when I pulled myself up and I said, okay, you're now going to go do Landmark again. You're going to do their whole curriculum, right? And the roots began to grow again. The ground,
Beautiful.
the ground smoothed out, and that is how they work together.
Leslie, I am captivated, as is the audience that are here. They have stayed the entire hour. They have
Great.
interacted throughout. I want to thank you. I would love to have you back, and I want to hear more of these stories.
Okay.
Your ability to just humbly tell the story and share in your own vulnerability is admirable. And
Thank you.
thank you for blessing us with your grace as you stand here today. And I am just in awe. And yes, Ronald, I'm going to watch this replay. I never watch the replays, but I do want to go back myself and watch the replays.
Oh my
So for
goodness.
those that are still here with us, sending comments even after the hour, thank you. For those that are watching the replay, do so intentionally. I would almost say this is a treat. This is almost like a series. Maybe we'll start a series with Leslie being
Oh,
a guest. I think that's an idea if she's open to it.
sure.
And then, Leslie, do stay on. I normally do a debrief afterwards, and I'm going to end the live. And for those that want to continue writing comments and know where to find Leslie, where do we find you? Best
Uh,
place to find you.
on LinkedIn, right? And the last digits are L Flowers. So it's
Yes.
LinkedIn in L Flowers. You'll recognize me when you bring up Leslie Flowers. You'll see
And
me.
I just want to come back and say, for those now that are intrigued to know more, if you've been indulging in this treat, imagine what that 12 weeks masterclass is going to be like. So I'm almost inclined to feel that I'm going to be there too, because I love listening to you
Oh,
and learning from you. So thank you. I'm going to end this live and we'll stay on, Leslie. Thank you to everyone who joined. Until next week. Bye for now.